So today is a little bit harsher than a lot of the topics I go into. They might be general. If I'm going to wrap it around directly to specific situations of action, then I'll give a heads up on that. In this case, my mission in life has always been educate yourself and educate yourself so you don't have to be fearful or worry. Because if we already know what's coming and we're prepared for it, life looks a lot different. And we can look at this from a lot of different perspectives. You know, as an example through the Bible guides us. There are angels who grabbed Lot's hand and pulled him out of the city in advance of something happening. The three wise men that knew that Jesus was coming and to bring the presents. And those presents later provided for Jesus himself to go on his voyage into Egypt and expand the baseline for his teachings. There's a lot of prophets in the Bible who guide and warn. And they're not meant to be truthsayers to manipulate, but giving people a chance to change their ways or to be aware. Now, without going into it, we've all heard the example of somebody asking for help and they're on the top of a mountain and God sends a helicopter, you know, that story. God is constantly whispering to us. And these are the great lessons that we've learned over the last year. The more we listen, the more we can be one step ahead. We are at war. And as long as you can be one step ahead, there's less fear in your heart. There's more time for celebration, appreciation, and gratitude. And so today's topic goes a little bit deeper. And again, the message is not to scare, it's to be realistic, be prepared, and do it wisely. So what do we have here? This came out in June of 2018. So this would have been a few years ago for the June 18th cover of Time on the political attacks launched by White House Robert Mueller, the special counsel investigating Russia's interference. And we all know now what's going on there. We turn to Brooklyn-based artist Tim O'Brien, a longtime Time collaborator. O'Brien has had work appear on over 24 Time covers since 1989, with subjects ranging from Pope Benedict to OBL. So again, this is right on the Time site, and how interesting the period of time that was created, what was being said. Now we know that DS is constantly having to tell us what they plan to do before they can take action. And so what was the message being told at this point, just a few years later, where we're at today? There's a lot of perspective in there to look at. Okay, so what do we have here? Of course, this is the main site you can go to for updates. And there's a post here that came in yesterday. There's several that new that have come in after that, but I highlighted this one with Memorial Day weekend coming up this weekend. Tomorrow, people start driving in the best automobile days of the year. I'm sorry to say that gasoline prices that you will be confronted with are far, far higher than they were just a short number of months ago when we had gasoline under $2 a gallon. Remember, as you're watching the metric tick and your dollars pile up, how great a job did as president. Soon, Russia and the Middle East will be making a fortune on oil. And you will be saying, wow, good it was to have. Wasn't it great to be energy independent? But we are energy independent no more. Have a great Memorial Day weekend. My son and I bought a whole bunch of flags to put up and down our street here. And today we go out and install them. Tomorrow we're going to set up a little stand in front of our house and give away treats. We're celebrating this Memorial Day for what it truly is. So what else do we have here? We've got some crybabies going on. Some Americans, if you would believe it, don't feel like being slaves anymore. So I'll come back to this in just a moment, but I wanted to skip here to this one as well. And it looks like there's been a lot of moving around of the information this morning. Most executives say they want more contract and temp workers. A majority of those workers say that that's not good. Let's see if this will reopen, because as you can see, it shut down. Yeah, it's the story's not going through today. Um, this is something that has really been the backbone of my communication for years and years. Really headed by the tech industry, and before that was the manufacturing industry with the maquiladores that went over the border to Mexico in order to take away jobs and manufacture. However, the quality never got up to par. And so a lot of those manufacturing plants ended up coming back to the United States as soon as they got the tax breaks and were able to do so. Now, it just, I don't well, now we do understand more. So I can't say I don't understand. For years, I didn't understand, why are you taking this country? So we used to have a United States with a cradle to grave scenario, and that essentially meant that after your youthful years of basic education, you would get a job and you would work that job until the point where you were ready to retire. Pensions were great. Through that time, you got to raise a family. You might have a house and a white picket fence. The dream was really open to a much, much broader perspective of individuals. The opportunity was there, of course, to have vacations, to plan vacations. You got so much time off a year. You worked minimal hours. There was probably one spouse, usually the mom, staying at home with the kids. You know, kids could hop on their bike and be gone all day. They could ride on the train tracks. They could go down to the soda fountain. Even later days, they could run down to the 7-Eleven. They could even go to a local park and play by themselves. My son's leash is very, very short. And over the last year, it's gotten even shorter. As in my own home, the attacks continue from YouTube and Facebook and social media that are constantly bombarding. And I try to explain to him that even if he chooses a show that he feels I would approve of, the commercials are not restricted. The add-ins are not restricted. And YouTube goes down a rabbit hole of the ungodly very, very quickly. So as we come back here, and most executives say they want more contract workers and temp workers, you know, there's a balance here. After a year and a half of being shut down and limited ability to sell and produce, meanwhile, Walmart, Costco, Home Depot, big box stores, Target stayed open. Yes, it was okay to go into a location with thousands of people, but heaven forbid the mom and pop shop with 3 people inside should be able to open. Those individuals need to be able to just have part-time workers get themselves back on their feet and move forward. And bless those families as they do that. But in this situation, that's not what we're talking about. This says executives. Executives means high-paying individuals who don't get their hands dirty to actually do the work any longer, in most cases, and they want to hire contract and temp workers so that they can boost their salary and pay. Do you know how much CEOs and executives boosted their pay over the last year? It was substantial. The reports would knock you over, as many of us suffer. So what does being a contractor temp worker mean? Well, they'd like you to know that being a contractor temp worker gives you the opportunity and the freedom to pick jobs and do what you want and really have a great, great life of freedom. And essentially, that's the furthest thing from the truth. Because it used to be that when a company would hire a contractor, they would pay them extra. And they would pay them extra because, you know, the hours may not be set. They could be let go at any time once the contracts shifted. Now, normally contracts still had a 2-week notice or whatever that clause was, but you know, it's 2 weeks. It's not a cradle to grave. They would also pay additional to give medical benefits that the individual could pay for it by themselves. And they would give something extra in order to set aside for retirement. Now, if you're a government contractor, you know all of these are built into the contract to shift the burden away from the government, but in order to put money in the contractor's pockets in order to pay that, that is not passed on by government contractors to workers. They pay the absolute minimum amount they can. They hire the expert level of which they need in that role and dispose of quickly. As you see, PhDs can quickly work their way out of a market. It's very sad, the disrespect towards knowledge and experience at this point. But there's a lifelong game going on here. If in fact you're a contract worker or a temp worker, well, let's step back one more time. Remember there was a Microsoft ruling, and if they had you in a contract status, they couldn't do that for more than 24 months. So most companies, to be safe, backed down to 12 months with a 6-month extension. And then later, most didn't hire. They just let you go. They'd actually let you go for the minimum period of time of, I think it's 3 to 6 months, depending on where the law is at this point. And then, hey, they'd hire you back as a contractor, because in that time, it was very hard to replace that job. You're still available. We can still take advantage of you. So after the whole Microsoft ruling, companies had to come up with another option. It was called vendor status. So the idea of a vendor might be somebody who provides food services to an organization that's going to be an evergreen model. And in that evergreen model, they don't have to abide by that 2-year rule. They get around it. So my job at Apple was a vendor status. Same role I had at Google. I mean, I had a lot more responsibilities, but the same type of operations direction that I was in. And yet, because they had a vendor status under the games played at Apple, who, by the way, is one of the top surveillance companies on this planet, there is no way that they do not know what every single employee is doing at every minute, because they make their business to know that. And I will go back into the surveillance model in another level. But when we talk about all the slave issues that Apple has overseas, they know 100% what is going there. And as you saw from last night's video, Shaggy says, just say it wasn't me. At what point are we going to stop tolerating this? So as we go back to this slide here, most executives say they want more contract and temp workers. They're saying we want more slaves. We don't want to have to pay them very much. We know there's a lot of other people that need jobs, so we'll go ahead and replace them the first chance that we get. You know, heaven forbid somebody should ask a question or step out of line. In my case, when I was told that because I was a female over 30, I would never be promoted, and yet at 90 days at Google, 100% of the men on my team who did not have the professional experience, did not go for a nano degree in self-driving vehicles, did not have the educational experience and advanced degrees I have, and did not have the management experience. 100% at 90 days were promoted with 150% pay increase. And you know what Google said upon investigation? That even though it was told, congratulations, you got a promotion, here's your new set of duties, here's the new title to go with that, and here's your pay increase. They told the investigators that that was not a promotion and that I had misinterpreted that. And the story goes on. The solution there, of course, was to shut off my badge access, because that's what you do when people ask. I wasn't fighting the system. I had received an email stating that. And so I just asked, what can I do to do a better job here, to put on my own shoulders what I can learn for the next technology, that learn for the next skill set, and be advanced so that the next time a job is posted, I could throw my hat in the ring. And then just be fairly interviewed was my stance. That's all I asked. And my badge access was shut off and security removed me. This is serious. This is extremely serious. The level of discrimination and, of course, racism that we're seeing this year. But again, as a contract status in that role, I could say nothing. It was done. And then the finger started being pointed. And nothing came out of that. Because with DFEH and EEOC, if the companies say, you know, we don't want to participate, DFEH and EEOC, the government organizations that monitor labor rules in the United States, because yes, work has rules, and they are allowing the companies again to wag the dog. So as we jump back in here and high paid executives say they want more contract and temp workers, they are telling individuals we want slaves. They are saying that we want individuals to show up when we want them to show up. We want to tell them what to do, when to do, how high to jump, and to smile while they're jumping. In my case, right before they shut off my badge access, they had me sweep out and clean a massive garage that had cockroaches, rat feces, broken eggs that had fallen from the rafters as punishment immediately before they shut off my badge access, because I was a female over 30 and I would never be promoted. And as a contract worker, they didn't have to. So this is an individual now that is not getting, it's very, very close to minimum wage, no medical benefits, no retirement benefits. And of course, once you're removed from a gig economy, which is a little different than the contract or the vendor status, from a gig economy, we learned last year, you better fight tooth and nail. And that was only by the grace of God that individuals got support from their country, from their states. Otherwise, that cliff is hard. Your car now has a lot of miles on it. You've worn yourself to the bone because you've never gotten a paid vacation. And then everything shuts down. And you know what? You don't qualify for unemployment. And again, there were exceptions last year by the grace of God, but that's not the norm. That certainly didn't happen the year before, and it won't happen next year. And yet executives stand up and say they want more contract and temp workers, and the expounding of gig workers continues. So that's the example of that individual. How can you balance a family on such a structure? The child has a soccer game and you can't show up, because if you show up, somebody else will take your job. You know, we used to in this country go on vacations. Nobody has disposable income to go on vacations. And how are you going to take time off work when you don't get paid time off? You can't plan for that. And you know that if you're away from that job too long, which could be 2 days, somebody else has taken on that role, because it is a contact sport in the workplace right now, watching over your back and shoulders every minute. Now, what are the next steps beyond that? What about our community? This is where I've been yelling from the rooftops, meeting with council members. If people are not being paid enough now, and we're bringing in additional workers into the area, causing a housing crisis where people are losing their longtime family homes. And a side note here, California taxes are the highest in the United States next to New York. And it is absolute greed and incompetence that we are at that step. How can you tell me that when my neighbor is paying $28,000 a year in property taxes, that that's not enough for their share in the neighborhood? We have the highest home prices. We have the highest property taxes. We have the highest sales taxes. They just passed an 18.3% income tax. Yet when you go through the United States, most income taxes per state are either at 0, and they manage, or I see a sweet spot of about 4 to 7% nationwide. Again, California, 18.3%. Let me tell you as well that during the last few months, our county decided that if a population that is without a dwelling at that time decides to reside close to your address, The county will very happily send you the bill and have a porta potty installed for them. I'm barely getting through on what I have in a survival mode of barely keeping my nose above water just to get air. How is that money going to come out? As my neighbors to the right are paying 28 and the neighbor on the left is paying $27,000 a year in property taxes, where's their extra cash? And that brings us one step closer to bankruptcy. So we are on a tipping point here. So now as I loop back here to contract workers in the community, if a company is refusing today to pay that individual enough to compensate them today, they are not having enough money to fairly provide for their family. Thus, many are receiving homeless benefits, Medi-Cal benefits, their medical insurance is being subsidized. Many are getting all sorts of different benefits from the county. Even though working full-time, often multiple jobs, these companies have decided to not treat people fairly. Now, you might say that they're struggling. Okay, then why are the executives increasing their salaries? So right now, they're not paying these slaves enough to get through the day, the month. People are losing their homes, even though they are wanting to work. Okay, what about tomorrow? So we saw tomorrow last year. What happens when the businesses have to do their cyclical furloughs or layoffs? You know, a lot of companies do that on a routine basis because it weeds out. You get rid of the old ones, anybody who's sour, anybody that you don't want anymore, anybody with the higher salary you paid for their expertise, and you call it a furlough. Right side, upside, it doesn't matter what you call it. It's an excuse to get rid of people, human beings. And then they hire back at a lesser stance. Now, I was at a company at one point, and they literally pulled the fire alarm and ran through telling us the building was on fire and to get out, don't grab your stuff, just get out fast. Well, you know, not all turnips were born yesterday. I went ahead and grabbed my backpack, my work bag, packed up my stuff, grabbed my keys, of course, on my wallet, and headed outside. And as I was in the parking lot, just kind of taking a break, stretching my legs, there was no smoke. I remember walking up to the doors, and I don't remember what my point was at that, but I wanted to ask a question. And I said, you know, what was going on. And at that time, they had a big announcement. And they announced to all of us in the parking lot that that was their furlough. Everybody had now been fired. They used emergency alarm, a fire, to scare people, drive them out, and fire them. And then they had a sign-up sheet that you could now make an appointment to come back in and get your stuff if you weren't smart enough to take it out with you the first time. So I was standing close, and I remember asking a question, and I remember the comment, no, we want you to stay. You are one of the top 3% in our company. We're just kind of cleaning house here. I think that's the first time in my career that I broke. I remember standing and yelling and screaming at the top of my lungs at the disgrace that had happened that day, all for greed. And yet that's no difference than what is done today. It's happening over and over again in our own United States. And yes, that was in California, specifically Southern California. So we've got today, we have what happens tomorrow that we saw last year when individuals and companies do furloughs. Who held the bag for that? Even if companies had been paying into unemployment insurance for years and years and decades, what happened last year was beyond that. From the state and federal funding levels, the massive amounts of funding that went into people's pockets. Yep, taxpayers paid for that, just like we're paying for the Medicare, the Medi-Cal, the food benefits, the housing benefits. That's on our shoulders. Now, what about in the future? The impact to the community is going to be devastating. As I've told you, It's 2021. Do you know where your retirement is? If your money's in the stock market, please explain to me with a logical conviction how today the stock market is about the highest it's ever been and continues to climb. And yet our world economy, not just your state or your city or our country, but the global economy has been locked down for 14 months and counting. Now, I understand the breakout of AWS, Amazon's cloud platform, and the sales of delivery businesses. That makes sense. Where's all the rest of the money coming from for these Fortune 500 NASDAQ stock exchange companies that are boosting this up? Most of that money's in China, and we know that that money's not coming back. It's gone. So it's 2021. Where's your retirement? So as these contract workers get closer to an age where, you know, retirement right now, I think is around 62, 64, 65 in this country. By the age of 41, I was told I was too old to work. By the age of 47, I had been physically pushed out of 3 different companies because they told me to my face I was too old. Even though I've got more energy, more longevity, I'm the first one on the plane to the remote locations, and I'm the one heading up new departments because individuals behind me don't have the management experience, the knowledge, or the drive to make things happen. And yet not a cultural fit, right? I'm not going to be the one out sleeping around and drinking on a Friday night with everybody. I mean, let's say it what it is. So what do we have right now? We're moving towards that cliff. Contract workers and temporary workers will be forced to retire younger and younger. And yet they don't have the money for retirement at 65 now. How are they going to have the retirement at 40? And heaven forbid, at least closer to 50. So what happens? These individuals get driven down into retail jobs at minimum wage just to survive. And if there's any kind of a medical situation, there goes everything they ever saved. Does anybody know here of a medical situation that might have curved us? Oh, a government sponsored one perhaps that happened in 2020 that we're still dealing with in 2021? The lies surrounding that were devastating, and the financial impact horrific. And for those who got caught up in the hospital stays and the longevity, generationally devastating. So now if we make it all these hurdles that have been set up for us, what are the next steps that are available? At some point, it's just not feasible to work on this level. Our reality is the brains just aren't there. Our focus is on smiling and life and joy. We have different priorities. We don't want to play the bullshit games anymore. So what happens when somebody is forced to retire and they have no retirement because there wasn't money set aside early on? Not that they weren't living within their means. You can't cut back anymore when you have nothing. Most people who have cell phone plans are even paid by the government. So at retirement, what is there? When the different states, specifically Democrat states and counties, collapse, they can't sustain all this homelessness and welfare programs. There go the pensions. When we finally realize, wait a minute, the 401ks are invested in China, there's no money there. When we finally realize that you have saved your whole life, and in my case, the federal government comes in and swoops in and takes everything they can, what does that do to your community? And yet the same companies who for some reason were able to do cradle to grave respect, remember summer picnics? Remember sharing with families? Remember showing gratitude for those who helped build up a business? Those days are gone, and as Shaggy says, it wasn't me. The fingers get pointed. So I want to go back over here to Jamie Dimon. Some Americans don't feel like going back to work. Really. So Jamie Dimon, really watched him through the years, gets his fingers in everything and glides above the clouds. Some Americans don't feel like going back to work. Now, I will tell you, over the last year, as I had a job that I was furloughed from because of government shutdowns, I don't know if that recording was going on still. So again, continuing here with government shutdowns, I was furloughed from a job that was a viable job. I love that job. Definitely issues there with any company, but wow, I had a passion for that role. And yet California decided, nope, you're not doing that in the state. Drove many of the companies doing what I was doing into other states, and they thrived. I went ahead and identified another role, went through the interview process and was hired for that role. And then I got a California shakedown. It cost me almost $750 in California fees and requirements in order to take this job that is headquartered in California with a W-2 income that had already been offered to me. And this is the way California supports that. During that time, California also said if you were furloughed during the cooties, those companies don't have to bring you back. Now, how dare Governor Newsom, King Newsom, say, you know what? It's probably too hard for you to find your current employees. So don't bother with that. When you rehire, you don't have to rehire those individuals. Just go ahead and find people new. How is it easier for them to, during cooties, when everything is shut down, go out and find, hire, and identify quality talent, do the onboarding, get them trained and up started better than going down the track of just pulling back people that they already have the phone number and email for, say, hey, let's go back to work next week. But those individuals would have earned times off. They would probably be making more money, and they have some stability within the company. But if you can just start over and retrain, why pay for that excellence? Because people are slaves. So this is locked again. Let's see if I can get that to shift. Here we go. So JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon suggested Thursday that companies are having trouble hiring in part because some Americans don't feel like working right now. Asked about the record high 8.1 million job openings recorded in March. So again, I have applied for close to 1,000 jobs over the last year and a half to get through this. Jobs are being posted. They're collecting resumes. They're not hiring people. And those who are complaining are probably for things that aren't necessities. Now there are some mom and pop stores that are trying to restart up again. There are, basic retail shops. There, places we get our food or water, gasoline. But a lot of the crap, I think we need to step off the ledge from and realize we don't need as human beings. And if we need it, we could probably forego it for a year and hold out. So here, a record high of 8.1 million job openings, and yet who's being hired? The CEO said there are many causes, including challenges with reopening schools. Yes. If your child cannot go to school, it is illegal to lock them in the closet at home, and certainly dangerous to have them in front of a Zoom classroom with YouTube on the other button. And enhanced unemployment benefits have really been the crux here. You're paying too much money. They need to stay home. Well, you know what? If different rates different places in different states. In my states, I think it's $450 a week plus the possible $300 additional benefit. But if $450 a week is a make it or break it for having a job, then you weren't paid enough to begin with, and you were already underneath the income level of what minimum wage was or minimum survival was in most counties. And if now for the first time in your life you get to take a vacation because you have not been paid enough, you couldn't plan, you couldn't relax and catch your breath, then good on you. Enjoy this time with your family for once. There's other opportunities out there. And as you get back on the track, maybe you will be a little pickier, that if you can get X dollars, why would you go back to work for less money? There is no company out there, no executive that would say, hey, you know what? I can sell this to you for $100,000. But because I just don't want to work today, and I'm just going to leave this out in the front yard, I'm going to let anybody take it for $10 that wants to pay. That's not the way companies are run. That's not the way executives get their jobs. Why should you as an individual run, as CEO of your family, run that any differently? Act smart, not hard. People actually have a lot of money, the JP Morgan CEO said at the House Financial Services Committee hearing aimed at holding the mega banks accountable, and they don't particularly feel like going back to work. Now, what is a lot of money? As I've stated, I've spent the last year, the last 5 months doing taxes nationwide to really get strong data points of where we're at. Nobody, extremely small percentage, has savings. Why would you have savings? If you have savings, you're taxed on the interest. If you have savings in the state of California, if you leave money in a savings account for 12 months and 1 day through escheatment, they steal it from you. And if you don't have surplus money, where's that money going? So people have stock options, but I'm here to tell you that people with stock options are already from an older generations and they're holding in the account, and many have been devalued. Or people in the tech communities have stock options and they have massive amounts. But anybody else that hasn't won the lottery in that category, there is no money. People are going paycheck to paycheck and they are doing all they can to get a decent job. Oh, look at this. Diamond, who made $31.5 million in total compensation last year, just didn't elaborate on that. How much have you made in compensation over your entire work career? Yeah, probably not 31.5 million that he made last year. And that more than likely is excluding bonuses and stock options and money from rentals that he has and global entities and off the books and tax exclusions. Some industries, including restaurants and factories, have reported hiring struggles in recent months. Economists have cited 3 main causes: lingering health concerns, a lack of childcare, and the $300 boost to federal unemployment benefits that could make it harder to fill low-wage positions. Many GOP-led states have recently decided to stop paying those enhanced unemployment benefits. Now that's a whole nother discussion. So here we have executives, including Jamie Dimon. They want more in their pocket. Oh, here's the article. Contract workers overwhelmingly want to be permanent employees. What? People are too lazy to work, but they want to be a permanent employee? We just want a baseline in order to survive, to take care of our families. But executives say they plan to rely more heavily on contract labor. This is a disgrace. This should have never been allowed. And the laws will continue to change so that the tail can wag the dog. Work has rules, and companies have learned to get around those rules to make trillions of dollars for themselves on our backs. So what's coming around the corner? Bank of America and Chase could start mortgage foreclosures as soon as July. Oh, but Wells Fargo is going to wait until 2022. Wells Fargo, who's been caught up in a number of scandals over the years and paid a pittance of all that they stole. They'd been doing it for decades and decades, got caught, paid a minor fine, and moved on. Bank of America is a very interesting case study in California because all the EBT cards, the EDD unemployment cards, all those benefits went through Bank of America. So if you go on unemployment, you get a debit card from Bank of America, and that's what the money is put on. Now, if you don't use that money, it sits on the card, and these are called unbanked customers. That money still has to sit somewhere, and that money is lent out at 7 to 9 times the amount that's on that card. They're collecting interest and making money on that money until you spend it. As soon as you get money on a government card, take that money off. Now, what else did Bank of America do? San Jose is one of the largest cities in California. Bank of America closed 100% of all of their banking locations in San Jose because of cooties. Now, when people were on unemployment and they needed the banking services the most, and a Bank of America, again, is the low end of banking. They are unfortunately always in the, they're scattered throughout the economy, but they're always in the neighborhoods who need the banking the most, or at least on the periphery. They don't dig themselves in. But 100% closed. You had to go to a neighboring city, in this case to Campbell, to find an open Bank of America to deal with your unemployment card, because Bank of America made billions of dollars in running that contract program for the government. They made billions of dollars in loaning that money out the back door. And then they closed all their shops and even put their own employees on unemployment in order to take advantage of the financial situation. Now, do you remember the day that you walked up to a bank last year and there was a big sign that says, you cannot enter this bank without a mask on? At that point, you should have known how the bullshit that is being thrown in our direction. Don't wear a mask into a bank. But again, who's in the bank? Each bank has very little actual cash there. The executives are not there. It's minimum wage workers that are tellers and maybe a few loan officers. So what if somebody has a mask on? If they're robbed, they're robbed, is unfortunately the attitude. So what else do we have here? Inflation, the action of inflating something or the condition of being inflated. So a general increase in prices and fall in the purchasing value of money. They've said that milk has gone up 5%, gas has gone up about $1. They were just going through all the prices tonight. So if in fact you need to buy anything in 2021, hey, how about a thrift store, a garage sale? There's a lot of apps right now that let you trade and barter. Try that route. Don't put more money into the system. If we need to bring the system to the knees because we are not consumers, then so be it. But right now, anything you spend money on is digging deeper into any potential chance you have to save yourself down the road. Again, we are at war. Grab your armor and your shield. Buy wisely. Now, we're always taught to be prepared. Now, in any time, especially in California, we don't know if there's earthquakes, throughout the nation. There's often different weather events. We saw what happened in Texas. We just don't know. So it's always wise to be prepared. And there's a lot of different products out there. I don't know this one. I pulled it up as an example. The bottom line is you don't have to go through and stock these 25-year products. If you've got the extra money to do so, hey, think ahead for your friend and your family. It's been told to me, though, if we do get to the point of food lines and you have a stockpile, you better get your butt in the food lines. Make it look like you're with everybody else. Other than that, when everything comes down and people know that you have more than they do, you won't have more for long. Is it okay to share? Absolutely. It's also okay to share right now and let people know it's important to prepare. But again, what can you do? The 3 and 5 gallon jugs of water, you can buy them at many different stores. You can buy them at the water stores and they're $25. You can get them at you know, some of these big box stores and they're between $3 and $9. I just bought a bunch for $3.44 because somebody bought them and returned them, and I now had to buy new lids for them. 6 lids were $1. So I've got stockpiles of water, but I cycle through it. We keep using it. These are things that we use anyways. We don't drink the city water. So as we drink a bottle, I put it beside. Once we're down 2 bottles, I go and fill them back up again. And I keep this amount of water for us. I also know in the point of a major disaster, my bathtub is ready. I keep it clean and I have a plug there. In the case of a major disaster, the plug goes in, the bathtub is filled with water. That can be used to flush a toilet. That could be used to for whatever we need water for, other than drinking, because I'm not drinking the tap water. There's things you can do to be ready. Now, what about food? Again, you don't have to go and spend thousands of dollars on these 25-year food packs. Although from what I'm looking at, the prices are not that high right now, and the offerings that they're providing, we've got some. But you know what is also possible? Run down to a dented can store, buy a bunch of dented cans, even buy regular cans. Buy packages of soup or flavoring, anything that you can add water to, or anything that you'll have an ability to quickly give a decent nutrients. I mean, you're not going to be able to keep bananas, but there's a lot of nutrients that you can get. And you can get those when they go on sale at the store and just keep them in your pantry. Cycle through and use them and enjoy them, but keep that pantry full. And you might want to grab a few treats too. How long will a Snickers chocolate bar live? Probably a long time. And after a few days of a disaster, that will taste like gold. So treat yourself well. Take a look at what you do and need on a daily basis, and just kind of start gathering. Don't go out and spend extra money. There's a lot of resources in the community to help you beef this up and be prepared. And just the notion that you've taken a step takes away that fear, because now you are in control. There is no reason to be afraid. There are so few things that we have control over right now. And yet the things that we do, when you take a step in that direction, you know that you absolutely have a chance in this world. Again, blessings to you all as we move through these times. Amen.